Okay, so this week you guys are being asked to share your testimony. And I realized that I have not ever given a testimony. So for the first part, it says in the first part of your testimony, you're supposed to share who you were before you encountered Christ. And I think why I wasn't specifically asked at the retreat to share my testimony, but I was asked, oh, if you want to, after I was given an assignment to speak on the relationship piece, I was asked if there was anything else I wanted to share. And I think what they were getting at is, did I want to make a testimony? And after watching people in the first retreat and the second retreat, I kind of felt like, I have no idea what to talk about because of this first part. It's asking who we were before we encountered Christ. And so a lot of these people were talking about hardships in their lives and how they had either never been a part of the church or how they had left the church. And then they talked about finding the church again and how it helped them get through these difficult times. I don't have that experience. I don't feel like I ever had a moment in my life where I hadn't encountered Christ. My family has always been Catholic. So I was raised in the church. My mom was a convert, but my dad was raised Catholic. His mom was very Catholic. So church was just a part of our lives. And I don't think I ever really truly questioned my faith. I mean, yes, everyone questions their faith at some point. We all struggle with, and I think it's normal, death and what's going to happen to us after we die. I think that's just normal, but I never had a moment where I completely lost the church. There may have been a moment in my life when I went to college where I wasn't going to church on a regular basis at first. And then I went to Carolina and they have this place called the Newman Center. And I found the Newman Center, and the priest there was just really, really good. I think that was the most I know a lot of people fall away during college, but I think that's when I really found my faith because the priest there was so good at connecting in his homilies with young people. I often felt growing up that I would go to church and I believed in the faith, but I was always checking out maybe during the homily and the readings. And I find sometimes even as an adult, I know this is embarrassing, but it still happens sometimes. But he was an amazing speaker, and I couldn't help myself not listen. So I was always listening, and I found, even though it was hard, I've always been a really good student and I wanted to do well in school and spent all this time studying. And so when you go to college, the workload is a lot more than what you experience in high school and middle school. So it was hard to take that time and go to church, but I did start making that a point, and it made me feel better. The other place where I don't feel like I've lost my faith now, but we're in the middle of the pandemic and there's been moments when I haven't gone to church because of the whole pandemic situation. But I do find Christ whenever I go to church. And I think especially with the Eucharist, like I'm not ashamed to admit that this past weekend, or when we had the retreat, that was the first time I'd had communion since church had gone back inside. We had started going, we had stopped going to church during the pandemic. We started going again when they went outside because my younger son had made first communion and I felt like it was really important for him to go, and we felt comfortable outside. And then when they went back into the church, we quit going again. We were obviously watching it online, but we weren't getting communion. And so I actually teared up just getting communion when we had our retreat. And then this past weekend, Mother's Day weekend, Owen and I, my other children were out of town, but Owen and I actually went back into church, and it was a very moving experience just being back in church, receiving the Eucharist. So I don't know. So the second part though says, give a detailed account of what God has done in our lives. I feel like God has done everything in my life. And I feel like the reason why I haven't had so many hardships is because God is constantly with me. I do pray, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and claim to be the most religious or the most perfect person in the world because I'm not. I'll be honest with you. But I do like to pray at night, and I try to do a good job of, sometimes we forget to always pray before meals when we should, but I do try to always pray at night. And I really do believe when people have hardships that if I pray for them, um, that God will be there and give them support. And that's usually what I pray for myself as well. I feel like the pandemic has been hard, and there's been other times when life has been hard. And whenever I feel like I can't take it anymore, when I'm starting to feel low, or struggling with all that's on my plate, I usually just pray to God for the strength that I need to get through it. And I really feel like he's there with me, like the footsteps in the sand poem. I feel like, um, I don't know. I feel like someone's there with me, carrying that burden with me. And so even when I have a lot on my plate, somehow I manage to get it all done. And that's usually because God's right there holding me up, holding my hand, helping me get through it. And and then the third part, it says how our lives have changed since we met Christ in the ways that we are striving to grow and become a better disciple of Christ. Um, like I said, I don't know if my life has specifically changed because I don't feel like I've ever strayed, truly away from my faith. But how am I becoming a better disciple of Christ? I feel like, I do feel like I get called sometimes to do more at church. When I was younger, I always liked to sing, so I would do choir. And I did do youth, even though I didn't think that I wanted to do youth. Because I went to St. Paul's growing up, which is over off Horsepen Creek Road, and I went to Southwest High School. So there weren't a lot of people from my high school that went to my church. But I did make some friends there, and I really liked singing in the choir, and I liked seeing those kids from like other schools. And so I did stick with youth. I think I did it all the way through high school. And then, but as an adult, I feel like life gets a little crazy. Like I don't sing in the choir, and partly that is not because I don't like the choir and I wouldn't like singing in it. But my husband is not Catholic, and he doesn't always go on I found that he's Presbyterian, but he wasn't really going to church when we got together. His family is like super involved in their church, but for whatever reason, it wasn't that he didn't believe and he didn't have faith. He just wasn't going on a regular basis. But I knew that if I didn't do choir, and he would go with me and go to church on no more, and he still doesn't go 100% of the time, but he goes most of the time. And I know that's because I go with him. Like if I had done the choir and not been sitting in the pew, I don't think that he would go. And I thought it was important for him to go and get that foundation, and also for my children to go and see their dad go on a regular basis. So that was a sacrifice I made there. But then I felt called on multiple occasions to teach. We used to have liturgy of the word before the pandemic hit. And my younger son was kind of shy and didn't like going back there. So I used to go with him, and I was just sitting there listening. And the lady who had been in charge of it at first, hadn't, kind of wanted, oh, why don't you go ahead and teach? And I had never wanted to. But then I figured when Caleb was there, like when I was sitting there with him, it seemed silly not to teach. So I felt called, like it was just a moment for me to start teaching. And I felt like, I could bring those experiences to the kids. I was teaching the little kids, and I had a little kid, so I felt like I could take the homily, which we're kind of supposed to break down for them, and make it more relatable, because I knew a lot of the references that the kids had at that time, because I had a little kid who was watching these cartoons and things as well, so I could make references to things that made sense to them. And so I felt like that was beneficial. And then I also knew that going through the pandemic, that doing confirmation was a lot of work and was going to be hard. And you guys all know my son, Owen. I felt drawn to teach this class because I knew he needed me to go through it with him, so he wasn't going through it alone. So when he was like, oh, this is too much work, I don't feel like doing it, I could be like, I'm here, I'm helping you, I'm going through it with you. So I felt called to teach. And you know, life is busy. I get it. You guys all have sports. I have that too. I've got to take all my kids to all their activities, and then I'm trying to work and help everybody with school. I mean, there's constantly going to be life things, but I still feel like I might be called to teach, and I might do it again next year, just because I have another kid who's going through it. And so I would like to be there for him and for, you know, for all the other kids. And hopefully it'll all be back in person. But anyway, so those are just some ways that I've tried to become a better disciple of Christ by getting more involved in church. And that's pretty much my testimony. And so if you have a situation like that where you don't feel like you have been, if you've been through, you know, difficulties in your life, then of course share that. That probably makes a great testimony. I mean, I love hearing people who've been through hardships and seeing how the Lord has worked through them and brought them back to the church and helped them get their life back on track. But then I started thinking, like, there's probably people like me too who came from a family that's been pretty stable and who helped them have a good foundation. Like, I hope my kids don't have these hardship stories to share. I hope I gave them a foundation. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. And that also speaks to the glories of God and the wonders of our religion, is that, you know, your life can be pretty good if you've had Christ. I mean, that's a testimony too. My life has been pretty good. My parents have stayed together. You know, I've stayed married, you know, for 17 years and had 3 kids, and we've never had some horrible tragedy. We just stayed steadfast and true to our religion, and it's given us this, you know, this great life and this sense of peace. And we're doing what, so I think that if your life has been good, you still can share a testimony, because it's probably your faith that's helping your life be good. It's helping these difficult situations that arise in your life not be so difficult, because you're sharing your burden with the Lord. So don't think because your life hasn't been difficult that you don't have a testimony to share.